15 minutes ago.
Launched a grenade.
Scorched earth.
Yeah, responding into D'Orlando Ledbetter, who covers the Falcons down in Atlanta, had tweeted out that Kevin Stefanski had a dumpster fire at quarterback in Cleveland. Baker Mayfield and Deshaun Watson failed and started the chain reaction to 11 others, which Baker responded with, "Failed is quite the reach, pal. Still waiting on a text or call from him after I got shipped."
Baker Mayfield just took some shots at his former Browns head coach and now newest Falcons head coach, Kevin Stefanski. A little bit of a backstory: when Kevin Stefanski took the head coaching gig with the Cleveland Browns back in 2020, Baker Mayfield was his quarterback for the next 2 seasons there. They had their ups and downs as a pairing in Cleveland. The first year together, they did make the playoffs and win a playoff game. But then the very next season, they went 6-8 together, missing the playoffs, which then led into the wild offseason in 2022 when the Browns traded for Deshaun Watson.
15 minutes ago, warmed a grenade-scorched earth. Responding into D'Orlando, Kevin Stefanski had a dumpster fire at quarterback in Cleveland. Guys, could Stefanski have at least gave him a text message, email? Maybe he's a little bit more personal? I don't know. Look, I need you to understand something right off the bat. What you're witnessing right now isn't just another NFL Twitter war. So don't skip a single second of this video. And if this story touches your heart, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments. Where are you watching from? Let's begin. This isn't Twitter beef. This isn't just a quarterback getting emotional on a random Tuesday night. What you just watched, what we all just watched, was years of frustration boiling over in real time. And honestly, it felt like someone finally said the quiet part out loud. Because when Baker Mayfield typed those words, when he said he got shipped off like garbage, that wasn't trash talk, that wasn't a joke, that was a scar talking. And he didn't say it once, he didn't say it twice. He said it like someone who's replayed that moment in his head 1,000 times. Shipped off like garbage. Shipped off like garbage. Shipped off like garbage. That phrase matters. Because quarterbacks don't talk like that unless something broke. And I'm not talking about a play call, I'm talking about trust. We've seen angry tweets before, we've seen ex-players fire shots, but this one hit different because it wasn't aimed at another player. It wasn't aimed at fans. It was aimed straight at the organization, at how Cleveland does business when it decides you're no longer the guy. And that's the part Browns fans should be paying attention to. Because this isn't just Baker versus Kevin Stefanski. This is Cleveland's reputation getting dragged into the street at the exact moment they can't afford it. New coaching search, quarterback uncertainty, eyes from around the league watching. And instead of stability, instead of silence, instead of control, you've got a former #1 pick lighting a match and walking away. When a former quarterback goes scorched earth like this, it sends a message. Not just to fans, to agents, to coaches, to every locker room in the league. It tells them what happens when you're used up. It tells them how communication ends. Or in this case, how it never even starts. Because listen to what Baker's really saying. He's not asking for a parade. He's not begging for a statue. He's saying, you couldn't even text me. That's not ego. That's basic respect. And when that's missing, players notice. They always do. And here's where this gets bigger than Baker. Somewhere right now, young quarterbacks are watching this. Prospects, rookies, guys grinding through college tape, dreaming about Sundays. They're watching how Cleveland handles its mess in public. They're watching former quarterbacks call the place toxic without ever using the word. And they're asking themselves a dangerous question. Is this where careers go to stall out? Because quarterbacks don't fail in a vacuum. They fail in environments. They fail when plans change every year, when voices shift, when promises get quietly erased. And when a guy like Baker flaws and all feels disposable enough to say this out loud, it forces you to wonder whether he's exposing dysfunction or exposing himself. That's the conflict. That's the tension. Is Baker finally telling the truth about how broken this franchise really is? Or is he proving why front offices eventually stop trusting him? Because the next detail changes everything. This wasn't just a tweet, it was a receipt. The depth chart isn't the problem. It never was. The building is. Because when you really sit with this Baker Mayfield situation, when you strip away the tweets and the noise and the personalities, what you're left with is something much bigger than one quarterback. You're left with a franchise that briefly tasted hope and then panicked the moment that hope got complicated. Let's remember what Baker represented in Cleveland. This wasn't just another draft pick. This was swagger walking through the door. This was confidence. This was finally, after years of jerseys collecting dust, a quarterback who didn't look scared to wear the helmet. 11 wins in 2020, a playoff victory, road toughness, energy that actually made people believe again. For a minute, Cleveland felt alive, and then the moment adversity hit, the moment injuries piled up and the easy answers disappeared, the entire thing unraveled fast. That's where the dumpster fire quarterback label comes in. Because once the media decides a narrative fits, it spreads like wildfire. One analyst says it, another repeats it. Then it's on a chyron. Then it's on your timeline. Suddenly, a quarterback who won a playoff game is being spoken about like a failed experiment. That's how this league works. Labels stick, context disappears, and that's dangerous. Not just for Baker, but for the next guy. Because here's the truth. A lot of fans don't want to hear. Organizational stability is a quarterback stat. We talk about arm strength, accuracy, processing, but none of that survives chaos. Young quarterbacks don't just need weapons. They need coherence. They need a coaching vision that doesn't reset every year. They need messaging that doesn't change every press conference. They need to know the plan still exists after one bad month. And Cleveland hasn't shown that. Not consistently. Not publicly. It's not the playbook, it's the people. It's not talent, it's trust. When a franchise pivots this often, when leaks keep popping up, when former players feel comfortable airing grievances because they think the building deserves it, that reputation spreads fast. Agents talk. Coaches talk. Prospects definitely talk. And that's where the young quarterback angle matters. A top prospect doesn't just ask, "Will you draft me?" He asks, "Who's protecting me? Who's designing the offense? Who's handling the media when things go wrong? Who's standing in front of ownership when I struggle? Who's keeping my name out of headlines when I'm just trying to learn the league?" Because if the answer feels shaky, talent doesn't matter, arm strength doesn't matter, draft position doesn't matter. We've seen this before. We've seen quarterbacks walk into unstable buildings and get labeled busts before they ever had a real chance. And we've seen others land in the right environment and suddenly look like stars. Same player, different structure. That's why this Baker situation resonates. Because whether you like him or not, his story forces a bigger question about Cleveland. Not about schemes, not about stats, about culture. And that's why this next part, the behind-the-scenes story, either proves Baker's point or destroys it. Here's the ugly part. The part nobody wants to sit with, but everybody keeps circling back to. Because once this came out, there was no going back. The radio host story. The claim that Baker Mayfield looked a Browns VP in the eye and told him to go bleep himself. Now, let's be clear about something right up front. None of us were in that room. We don't know exactly how it went down. This is a reported allegation, not a court ruling. But the moment that story hit the airwaves, it poured gasoline on an already raging fire, and it changed how this whole situation has to be viewed. Because now there are only two lanes this story can live in, and neither one is clean. If Baker really said it, if he really crossed that line, then yeah, it explains a lot. It explains why relationships fractured beyond repair. It explains why patience ran out. It explains why the organization decided, we're done here, and moved on fast, quietly, and without much sympathy. In any workplace, that's a bridge you don't just burn, you vaporize it. And if that's the truth, then Baker didn't just get shipped out, he pushed himself out. But here's the other lane, and this one might be even worse. If this story is being leaked now, years later, right as Baker fires back publicly, then what does that say about the building, What does that say about how Cleveland handles conflict? Because healthy organizations don't let their mess spill into the open like this. They don't air internal confrontations on sports radio. They don't let former employees and anonymous voices shape the narrative in public. That's not strength, that's damage control. Either way, it's a terrible look. Because what this turns into is a public courtroom, fans picking sides, media recycling quotes, everybody arguing about tone instead of fixing the problem. And once an organization reaches that point, the damage goes way beyond one quarterback. This is how trust dies. When players feel like stories get weaponized, when front offices feel like players can't be controlled, when everything becomes transactional instead of collaborative, and that's when you start hearing the word nobody wants attached to their franchise, disposable. Because now imagine you're a young quarterback watching this. You're not even in the league yet. You're studying coverages, grinding tape, trying to stay healthy. And you're seeing a former #1 pick get dragged through a public mess years after he left the building. You're seeing leadership disputes become talk radio content. You're seeing chaos leak out instead of being handled internally. That messes with careers before they even start. This is how organizations lose leverage. This is how top coaches hesitate. This is how prospects quietly hope their name doesn't get called by the wrong team. Not because of the roster, but because of the culture. And here's the line that keeps echoing in my head through all of this. When the building leaks, it's because somebody wants power. Someone wants control of the story. Someone wants to win the narrative. Someone wants to shift blame. And once that starts happening, football becomes secondary. And now look at the coaching search, because this is where the sabotage becomes undeniable. This coaching search is the warning label, and every quarterback prospect knows how to read it. Because when a team can't get the right coaches to stay in the room, that tells you more than any depth chart ever could. Coaching matters more than any single roster move, especially for a young quarterback. Scheme protects you. Coaching develops you. Leadership buys you time when things go wrong, and when that part starts wobbling, everything else becomes noise. The turning point here is simple. Candidates pulling back. When offensive-minded coaches hesitate, when names quietly remove themselves, that's not coincidence. That's information. Smart coaches don't walk away from opportunities unless something doesn't add up. And when they do, it usually means one of three things: control issues, unclear direction, or ownership meddling. Sometimes all three. Here's how this works in plain terms. Coaches don't just want a title. They want a say. They want alignment. They want to know that if they hitch their career to a quarterback, that quarterback won't be yanked out from under them after one rough season. They want a front office that's on the same page, ownership that doesn't panic, a GM who isn't playing defense in the media. When that alignment isn't there, the smartest candidates see the trap. They see the scapegoat setup. They know how this movie ends, and they choose not to star in it. And that's why this search feels frantic instead of focused. Then you layer in the Rooney Rule element, and this is where the optics matter. The rule exists for a reason, and when handled properly, it creates opportunity and accountability. But when a team is already scrambling, it can feel like another complication instead of part of a plan. Delays stack up, interviews get rushed, the timeline stretches, and suddenly the entire process feels reactive. That's the key word here. Reactive. Cleveland doesn't look like a team building towards something. They look like a team responding to pressure, responding to headlines, responding to leaks, responding to yesterday's mistake instead of tomorrow's vision. And that vibe, prospects feel it immediately. Because quarterbacks aren't just evaluating rosters, they're evaluating ecosystems. They're asking, who's teaching me? Who's designing the offense around me? Who's defending me when I struggle? Who's still here 2 years from now? And when those answers feel uncertain, talent becomes secondary. We've seen this before. We've seen gifted quarterbacks land in chaos and spend years trying to survive instead of grow. We've seen others land in stable environments and suddenly look like entirely different players. Which brings us to the uncomfortable pivot. This chaos might actually help the prospect, because if Cleveland passes, if the dysfunction scares them off, or pushes the board another direction, that quarterback might land somewhere healthier, somewhere quieter, somewhere with a clearer plan and fewer fires to put out. And that's the part fans don't want to admit. Sometimes the blessing is getting missed by the wrong team. This is where it all comes together. This is where the cycle completes. Because if you've watched the NFL long enough, you already know how this part goes. Baker Mayfield with a chip on his shoulder is not the guy you want to see on the schedule. This is his fuel. This is his oxygen. This is the version of Baker that doesn't need hype videos or speeches. He just needs a reason. And right now, he's got one circled in red ink. You can already see it. Those dates on the calendar. The late nights in the film room. The extra reps. The quiet smile when someone brings up his former coach. Baker lives for this stuff. Give him doubt. Give him disrespect. Give him someone who made him feel disposable, and suddenly he's dangerous again. We've seen this movie before. He locks in. He simplifies the game. He plays fast, angry, free. The ball comes out on time. The swagger comes back. And that first matchup, it feels inevitable. 350-4. Maybe not on the stat sheet exactly, but in impact, in message, in you shouldn't have doubted me. That's the revenge season arc. And whether you love Baker or can't stand him, you know it's coming. But the bigger prediction, that's not about Baker at all. It's about the draft. Because while all of this is unfolding publicly, the tweets, the leaks, the coaching chaos, there's a young quarterback watching closely. And here's what fans need to understand about the modern NFL. Prospects have more leverage than ever, not through threats, not through ultimatums, through perception. Branding matters, media matters, narrative matters. Nobody's saying a player is going to force his way somewhere. That's not how this works. But players and their camps absolutely influence the temperature. They influence how teams view fit. They influence who feels confident making the pick and who hesitates. And when an organization looks unstable, when it looks loud in the worst way, when former quarterbacks are still dragging the building years later, that hesitation grows. So here's my prediction. This dysfunction reshapes the board. It shifts conversations. It makes teams second guess. And it opens the door for that quarterback to land somewhere quieter, somewhere steadier, somewhere that won't turn his first mistake into a headline. Sometimes careers are saved not by where you go, but by where you don't. And that's why this moment matters more than one tweet or one feud. It's about reputation. It's about trust. It's about which franchises understand that quarterbacks are investments, not expendables. So now I'll throw it to you, because this is where the debate really lives. Was Baker done dirty? Or did Baker burn his own bridge? And if you're a top quarterback prospect, do you want Cleveland or do you run? Drop your take in the comments. Argue it out. This is what football conversation is supposed to be. Make sure you're subscribed, because we're tracking every twist, every move, every headline in this offseason. This story isn't fading, it's accelerating. Because this isn't over. It's not close to over. It's just getting started.